town of Ashford sat in a forgotten corner of Maine, wrapped in thick pine forests and shrouded by mist that seemed to cling even in daylight. Travelers rarely stopped here anymore. The highway had long rerouted commerce and tourists away. What remained was an aging main street with shuttered storefronts, a diner that refused to die, and a gas station that looked like it hadn't been repainted since the 70s. Emma Carter pressed her forehead against the cool glass of David's Jeep as they turned off the main road. The late autumn air had that gray heaviness to it, as if the season itself carried secrets it didn't wish to share. "This place is smaller than I thought," David said, one hand on the wheel, the other tapping nervously against the steering column. Emma smiled faintly. "That's why stories hide here. People forget. They stop asking questions." For weeks, she had been researching the disappearance of the Halpern family. Father, mother, and 2 children vanished from their farmhouse on the edge of Ashford in 1974. No bodies, no traces, just an abandoned house with dishes still on the table, toys scattered in the hallway, and a calendar forever stuck on the 16th of October. Locals called it the Hollow House. Rumors swirled about it being haunted, cursed, or worse, that the house itself was alive. For decades, no one dared to live there. Realtors tried to sell it. Buyers never stayed past a night. Teenagers dared each other to break in. Some came back pale and shaken. Others refused to speak about what they saw. A few never came back at all. Emma wasn't one for ghost stories. She was a journalist, a rationalist, but she was also someone who believed that behind every rumor lay a kernel of truth, something human and real. Her instincts told her that the Halperns hadn't simply disappeared into thin air. David adjusted the volume on the radio, static crackling before he switched it off. "So, remind me why we couldn't just research this from Boston? Interviews, archives, that sort of thing?" "Because the truth is here," Emma replied. Her voice carried a conviction that silenced his complaints. "And if I'm going to write about the Hollow House, I need to see it, smell it, hear it creak under my feet." David shook his head but didn't argue. He loved Emma's fire, even if it often dragged him into situations he'd rather avoid. His role as photographer was supposed to be safe documentary work, travel portraits, not this. As they entered Ashford proper, the Jeep rolled past sagging houses, some with boards nailed across their windows, others leaning slightly like tired old men. A handful of residents walked the street, each one stopping to stare as the outsiders passed by. Emma met their gazes, unflinching. She knew that small towns always recognize strangers immediately, and in a place like this, strangers were rarely welcomed. They parked outside the diner. Its flickering neon sign read simply, "Eats." Inside, the smell of burnt coffee and fried food seeped through the door, even before Emma pushed it open. The chatter inside died almost instantly. A dozen pairs of eyes turned to them. Emma lifted her chin and walked to the counter as if she belonged there. David followed, feeling the weight of every stare. The waitress, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes, approached. "What'll it be?" Her voice was flat, but there was a nervous twitch to the way she held her pen. "Coffee, 2 eggs, toast," Emma said briskly. Then, lowering her voice just enough to be heard by the woman, "We're looking for the Hollow House." The pen froze above the notepad. The waitress's jaw tightened. A man in the corner coughed loudly, muttering, "Out-of-towners, figures." The sheriff arrived before the tension could thicken. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man with a gray mustache and eyes that had seen too much. The badge on his chest read Sheriff Collins. "You're not from around here," he said, sliding onto the stool beside Emma without invitation. "No, sir. I'm Emma Carter, freelance journalist. This is David Miller, my photographer. We're doing a piece on the Halpern disappearance." The sheriff's expression hardened. "That case is closed. With respect, Sheriff, a disappearance without answers is never closed. Don't you think people deserve to know what really happened?" Collins leaned closer, his voice dropped. "Listen carefully. That house isn't just some story to chase. It's It's a wound this town has carried for nearly 50 years. Every time someone goes poking around, something bad happens. So if you value your life and your friends, you'll get back in that Jeep and leave. David almost nodded right then and there, but Emma's eyes blazed with determination. "We can't do that," she said quietly. The sheriff stared at her for a long moment, then sighed heavily. "Fine, I can't stop you, but don't say I didn't warn you." He left money on the counter for his coffee untouched and walked out without another glance. The silence in the diner grew thicker, but Emma felt her pulse quicken. Warnings never scared her off. They only confirmed she was onto something. By late afternoon, Emma and David stood at the edge of a long dirt road flanked by skeletal trees stripped bare of their leaves. At the end of that road, barely visible through the mist, loomed the house, the Hollow House. Its roof sagged, its windows were black pits, and the front door hung slightly ajar as if waiting for them. Crows perched along the rotting fence, their cries harsh and mocking. David raised his camera and snapped a shot. The shutter clicked, echoing unnaturally loud in the stillness. "Last chance to turn back," he muttered. Emma tightened her grip on her notebook. "We didn't come all this way to turn back." They walked forward together, the dirt crunching beneath their boots. Each step seemed to draw the world quieter, until even the wind stopped moving. When they reached the porch, Emma felt it, a pressure in the air, heavy and suffocating, like being underwater. Her breath caught, and for a moment, she swore she heard whispers seeping from the cracks in the wood. David's hand brushed hers, cold and trembling. "Do you hear that?" Emma nodded slowly. The Hollow House was waiting, and it had been waiting a very long time. The front door groaned as Emma pushed it open, hinges shrieking in protest like a warning. The stale air inside hit them immediately, thick with dust, rot, and something faintly metallic, like rust or blood. David coughed into his sleeve. "God, it smells like something died in here." Emma ignored him, stepping into the foyer. The floorboards creaked under her boots. Her flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing peeling wallpaper, cobwebs clinging like lace, and picture frames still hanging crookedly on the walls. A family of 4 stared back from one of the frames. A man in flannel, a woman with dark curls, 2 children grinning in Sunday clothes. The Halperns. Their smiles were too bright, too fixed, frozen in time. David raised his camera. Click. The flash burst, and for the briefest moment, Emma thought she saw the mother's eyes shift toward her. When the light faded, the photo was normal again. "Did you see?" Emma began. David lowered the camera, pale. "Yeah, I saw." They explored the house slowly, room by room. The kitchen looked as though it had been abandoned mid-meal. Plates with hardened scraps of food still sat on the table. A child's glass of milk had curdled into a yellow sludge. The clock above the stove read 7:13, its hands frozen. 70s decor, untouched, Emma whispered, scribbling in her notebook. "It's like time just stopped." David snapped more photos. The camera's shutter echoed unnaturally in the silence. Each flash seemed to reveal something just beyond the edge of vision. A shadow where none should be. A face half seen in a doorway. Upstairs, the bedrooms were worse. Toys littered the floor of the children's room. A headless doll, a wooden truck with one wheel missing. The beds were neatly made, but the pillows bore the faint indentations of heads that hadn't rested there in decades. David picked up a music box from the dresser. "Wonder if this still works." He turned the crank. The melody began, slow and warped, the tinny notes of "You Are My Sunshine" filling the room. Halfway through, the song stuttered, slowed, then clicked. The lid of the music box snapped shut on its own. David dropped it, heart racing. Emma's pen shook in her hand, but her eyes gleamed with determination. "Document everything," she whispered. Night fell quickly, swallowing the house in a suffocating black. They set up camp in the living room, laying out sleeping bags on the dusty floor. David lit a lantern, its warm glow pushing back the shadows just enough to feel less trapped. Emma typed notes on her laptop while David reviewed the day's photographs. He froze on one image, the family portrait. "Emma, look at this." She leaned closer, her stomach tightened. In the photo, the two children were no longer smiling. Their mouths hung open in silent screams, eyes hollow pits of black. "That's not possible," David muttered. He checked the camera. The digital display showed the same image. Emma's voice was steady, though her hands trembled. "The house doesn't want us here." Around midnight, the first sound came. Thud. Somewhere, upstairs, heavy footsteps moved slowly across the floorboards. David stiffened. "Someone's here." Emma shook her head. "No one lives here." The footsteps stopped directly above them. Then drag, drag, drag. It was as though something was pulling its weight across the floor, inch by inch. David grabbed his camera, raising it toward the ceiling. The flash burst. The light revealed nothing. But when the flash died, the dragging continued, this time down the stairs. Emma's breath caught. "It's coming closer." They backed toward the front door, but it slammed shut with a deafening bang, the locks clicking into place on their own. The lantern flickered violently, then went out, plunging them into darkness. David fumbled for his flashlight. When the beam cut through the gloom, Emma gasped. At the end of the hallway stood a figure. It was tall, impossibly thin, its limbs too long, its face obscured by shadow. It didn't move. It only watched. The whispers began, then soft, sibilant voices layered over one another, speaking in a language neither of them understood. They filled Emma's head, pressing against her skull like claws scratching to get inside. She clutched her temples, falling to her knees. Stop it," David shouted. "Leave us alone." His voice cracked with terror. The figure tilted its head, unnaturally slow, as though curious. Then, in the exact voice of Sheriff Collins, it said, "Get out, before it's too late." And then it vanished. For hours they sat huddled in the dark, too terrified to sleep. The house creaked and groaned around them, alive in its own way. Emma wrote one final note before exhaustion claimed her. The hollow house doesn't just hold memories, it holds them, and it doesn't let go. The morning light did little to ease the suffocating dread that had settled over Emma and David. They hadn't slept, only drifted in and out of uneasy half-dreams, listening to the house breathe around them. Emma forced herself to sit up, brushing dust from her hair. "We need to know what happened here," she whispered hoarsely. "We need to dig." David rubbed his eyes, pale and exhausted. "Emma, after last night, maybe we should not dig. Maybe we should leave while we still can." She shook her head firmly. "If we leave now, all we have are a few creepy photos. But if we find the truth, if we uncover what the hollow house is hiding, this could be the story of my career." David stared at her, his mouth tight, but he didn't argue. He knew Emma well enough. Once she had the scent of a mystery, nothing could pry her away. They began searching the house systematically, starting in the basement. The air grew colder the farther they descended, the wooden stairs groaning under their weight. The single bulb above them was dead, so they relied on flashlights. The basement was cluttered with relics, broken furniture, rusted tools, boxes warped from decades of damp. But one corner caught Emma's attention. A metal filing cabinet stood alone, its drawers sealed with a thick layer of dust. Emma tugged one open. To her surprise, it slid easily, as though waiting for her. Inside were manila folders, police reports, newspaper clippings, handwritten notes. David leaned over her shoulder. "What the hell is this?" Emma flipped through the files. They weren't just about the Halperns. There were reports of missing persons dating back to the 1922nd, entire families, couples, even drifters who had passed through Ashford. "Look at this," Emma whispered. She held up a yellowed article from 1951. 3 teenagers disappear after night in abandoned farmhouse. David scanned another file. This one says a deputy sheriff vanished in 2062 while investigating noises at the property. Emma's pen scratched furiously in her notebook. It's not just the Halperns. This house has been swallowing people for nearly a century. Her flashlight flickered, and in that brief sputter of darkness, she swore the basement stretched deeper than it should, the shadows yawning like a tunnel. By midday, they returned to the diner, seeking answers from someone still alive to tell the tale. The townsfolk stared as they entered, whispers following them like a tide. Sheriff Collins was there, sitting alone with a black coffee. He didn't look surprised to see them. "You didn't listen," he said flatly. Emma set the folder of clippings on his table. "How could we leave after finding this? Sheriff, people have been disappearing in that house for decades. Why hasn't anyone done something?" Collins's face hardened. "Because some things can't be fixed. That house isn't normal. It doesn't just haunt. It takes. My father was the deputy who vanished in 2062. I was 10 years old when he walked into that house. He never walked out." David frowned. "So you believe it's alive?" Collins's eyes burned with grief and rage. "Believe it? I've lived my whole life with the proof. Every time someone goes inside, the Hollow House decides whether it'll let them go. Most times, it doesn't quit." Emma leaned forward. "Then why is it still standing? Why hasn't it been burned down?" The sheriff's jaw tightened. "You think we haven't tried? Fire, demolition, even explosives. The damn place rebuilds itself, like it refuses to die. Some say the land is cursed. Others say the house is a doorway to somewhere else." David's voice dropped. "A doorway to what?" Collins shook his head. "You don't want to know." Emma scribbled furiously in her notebook. "But I do. That's exactly what I came here to find." The sheriff slammed his hand on the table, startling the room. "You're playing with something you don't understand, Miss Carter. And the more you dig, the closer it gets to taking you." That night, they returned to the Hollow House, armed with their new knowledge. Emma insisted on setting up recording equipment, cameras, audio devices, even a motion detector David had used for wildlife shoots. "If the house is really a predator," Emma said, adjusting a tripod, "then maybe we can capture how it hunts." David muttered, "Or maybe we'll just be its next meal." As they moved through the upstairs hallway, Emma noticed a door she swore hadn't been there before. The paint was fresh compared to the others, the handle gleaming faintly. "Did you see this yesterday?" she asked. David shook his head. "Number? Definitely not." Emma's hand trembled as she reached for the knob. It turned easily. The door swung open to reveal a narrow stairwell leading downward far deeper than the basement should go. From below came the sound of children laughing. But the Halpern children had been missing for nearly 50 years. Emma swallowed hard. "Do you hear that?" David's face was ashen. "Yeah, I hear it." The laughter grew louder, echoing up the stairwell. And beneath it, faint but unmistakable, came the sound of someone whispering Emma's name. The stairwell descended far deeper than the house should allow. The air grew colder with every step, damp and heavy, carrying the smell of earth long undisturbed. Their flashlights barely pierced the gloom, the walls pressing close around them as though the house itself were swallowing them whole. The children's laughter echoed from below, high-pitched, playful, but warped, as if stretched through a broken speaker. David whispered, "Emma, this is wrong. This staircase shouldn't exist." Emma's voice was steady, but her grip on the flashlight was white-knuckled. "That's the point. This is where the truth is." They reached the bottom at last, stepping into a vast chamber that couldn't possibly fit beneath the house. The ceiling arched impossibly high, roots dangling like black veins. The floor was packed earth, yet pulsing faintly, as though something beneath it was breathing. At the far end stood rows of doors, dozens of them, each one different. Some wooden, some metal, some ancient, some modern. None belonged together, and yet they lined the walls like teeth in a monstrous jaw. David raised his camera, snapping frantically. The flash illuminated things the naked eye couldn't see. Faint outlines of figures standing just beyond the light. Faces twisted in silent screams. Hands pressed against invisible glass. Emma's voice cracked. "Oh my God, these are the missing people." She stepped closer to one door, its paint peeling. A faint child's voice drifted through. "Mommy, Daddy." Her hand hovered over the knob. David grabbed her wrist. We don't know what's on the other side." But the door trembled, rattling violently as if something inside was desperate to get out. Suddenly the chamber groaned. The floor buckled, and with it came a sound, low, guttural, like the grinding of stone. The walls pulsed, roots shifted. David realized it first. "Emma, this isn't a basement. This is it. The house itself. It's alive." The laughter returned, louder now, echoing from every door at once. Voices overlapped: children, women, men crying, pleading, screaming. The doors shook as though struck from within. Emma clutched her notebook, words spilling across the page in frantic scrawl. "The Hollow House doesn't haunt, it consumes. Every door is a mouth. Every missing person is still here." The earth split beneath their feet, revealing a pit. Inside writhed countless shapes. Arms, faces, torsos fused into the walls of flesh and soil, their mouths open in endless moans. The Halperns were there, their eyes wide and unblinking, mouths moving in silent terror. Emma staggered back, choking. They never left. They're part of it. A voice thundered through the chamber then, layered with countless tones, male and female, child and elder, all speaking as one. "We are hollow. We hunger. You are ours now." The doors burst open. Darkness poured out, not absence of light, but a physical tide, writhing with shadowy limbs that clawed at the floor. David pulled Emma back toward the stairwell. "We have to go now." They ran, the flashlight beams cutting through the chaos. Behind them, the chamber howled, the voices merging into a single shriek that rattled their bones. The staircase stretched impossibly longer, each step doubling, tripling, as though the house were lengthening the climb. Emma's lungs burned. "It won't let us out." David dropped the camera, smashing it against the wall. The flash exploded one last time, searing the darkness. For a heartbeat, the stairwell shrank back to normal length. They burst through the door at the top, slamming it shut behind them. The laughter cut off instantly. When Emma turned, the door was gone, just a blank wall. They collapsed in the living room, gasping for air. Dust swirled lazily as if nothing had happened, as if the house had simply reset itself. David's hands shook violently. "We can't stay here, Emma. Whatever that was, it wants us." Emma stared at her notebook, pages filled with frantic notes she didn't remember writing. Symbols, drawings of the doors, the pit, faces twisted in agony. Her hand throbbed, cramped, as though guided by something else. In the margin, scrawled in jagged handwriting not her own, were the words, "The Hollow always keeps what it swallows." She looked at David, her voice a whisper. "We may already belong to it." They didn't sleep, couldn't breathe. The house no longer creaked like old timber. It breathed. Every gust of wind outside rattled the glass like fingernails. Shadows bent at the wrong angles, cooling in corners even when their lantern glowed bright. David paced the living room, his nerves unraveling. "We have to leave, Emma. Now, before it decides to finish what it started." Emma sat cross-legged on the dusty floor, notebook in her lap. Her eyes were hollow, her pen moving on its own. She didn't seem to hear him. "Emma," David snapped, kneeling in front of her. He shook her shoulders. "Hey, stay with me." She blinked, as if waking from a dream. The page before her was filled with words she hadn't consciously written. The doors never open outward. They only open in. Her throat tightened. "David, I think we can't just leave. It's already marked us." As if to prove her point, the front door rattled violently, locks snapping shut one by one. The windows blackened, not from boards or curtains, but from a darkness that pressed against the glass. Alive and watching, David's voice cracked. "It's trapping us." They tried anyway. The moment David touched the front door handle, the temperature plummeted. Frost spread across the walls, their breath fogging the air. Then came the whispers, layered voices spilling from every corner. "Emma, David, stay." The living room warped, stretching and twisting until the doorway no longer led outside, but into another hallway lined with the same endless doors they had seen beneath the house. Emma screamed, "It's pulling the basement up here!" David grabbed her hand. "We run. We don't stop." They sprinted down the hallway, doors slamming open as they passed. Each one revealed a glimpse of something monstrous. A figure with too many arms, a woman screaming without a mouth, a child's eyes glowing red in the dark. The air thickened, pressing against them like invisible hands. Emma stumbled, nearly dragged into one of the open doors. David yanked her back just as a clawed hand swiped across the floor, gouging deep marks into the wood. They burst into what should have been the dining room, but instead of a table and chairs, the floor yawned open into the pit they had seen earlier. The writhing mass of faces and bodies, all fused into the living flesh of the hollow. The Halpern family stared up at them from below, eyes wide, mouths moving in silent pleas. Emma fell to her knees at the edge, tears streaking her dusty face. "They're still alive, David. Dear God, they're still alive." Hands reached upward from the pit, grasping. Some were human, some weren't. David pulled her back. "Emma, no. That's what it wants. It's trying to pull you in." The voices thundered again, shaking the house to its foundations. "We are hollow. We take. You belong." In desperation, David grabbed the lantern and hurled it into the pit. Flames roared up, catching on the fleshy walls. The chamber howled in agony, the faces twisting, writhing as black smoke filled the air. The house shuddered violently. Plaster cracked. Beams splintered. For the first time, it sounded wounded. "Run!" David shouted. They stumbled through collapsing hallways, dodging falling debris. The house screamed around them, every door slamming, windows shattering into darkness. Emma clutched her notebook like a lifeline. At last, the front door loomed before them open. The outside world glowed faintly beyond it, dawn breaking over the trees. David shoved Emma forward. "Go! Don't look back!" They leapt through the doorway and found themselves in the foyer again. The same rotting wallpaper, the same crooked family portrait, the door ahead still wide open, mocking. David's chest heaved. "No, no, no, no. We made it." "We," Emma whispered, her voice broken. "It's a loop. It won't let us go." Behind them, the portrait on the wall had changed. The Halperns were gone. In their place were two new figures, Emma and David, smiling stiffly, eyes too bright, frozen in time. David's scream tore through the house. Emma dropped her notebook. The last page had filled itself with fresh writing. "The hollow always hungers. The hollow always keeps. The hollow is forever." The lantern flickered once, then died. The door slammed shut. Weeks later, Sheriff Collins drove by the hollow house. He saw the Jeep still parked at the end of the dirt road, dust gathering on its hood. He didn't bother checking inside. He already knew. Another story swallowed, another warning ignored. He tipped his hat against the gray Maine sky and muttered, "God forgive them." The house stood silent, waiting. And somewhere deep within its walls, new voices whispered in the dark.